Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the First Universalist Church of Rochester, where we are called to nurture the Spirit and serve the community. I'm Peter House, Summer Minister. My pronouns are he, him, and leading us in worship today are Tom Williams, he, him, our worship associate. And we have our friend Anton, he, him, and Brock T. Chesbold, he, him, with our music. Tech support, Ezekiel McGee, they, them, as our grusher, and Beth Ayers, she, her, the online coffee hour, and Carol Williams, she, her, and Coretta Broussard, she, her, providing our child care this morning. What a wonderful group of people. Our summer services have shifted to 10 a.m., and if you would like to find a way to support our summer services, please sign up to host coffee hour one of the Sundays. It is such an important ministry to support this welcoming part of our summer. See your order of service for instructions. If you are here for the first time this morning, we especially welcome you. Thank you for making it to this worshiping community. We have a visitors forum which can be found in the chat for our folks online and can be accessed by scanning a QR code in your pews or on the back of your order of service. Please fill out the form so that we may offer you a welcome beyond this worship service. Before we take a moment to turn to our neighbor, let us take a moment to turn towards the camera to greet our online worshiping community. Please offer a wave. If you're online, please pop into the chat to offer a greeting. To our online community, please wait to share joys and sorrows until later in the service so that they will be visible to those of us here in the sanctuary. If you are here at First Universalist now, let us take a moment to turn to our neighbor this morning and offer a greeting. And now as we wrap up our greetings, let us sing together our opening hymn, which is number 8, Mother Spirit, Father Spirit.
This is my magic magnet. I'm going to wave it and bring 3 images back to your mind, right up to the front. You don't even have to close your eyes. I know these images are all there in you. First, I want you to think of the movie The Sound of Music, when the Von Trapp family is singing, "So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, adieu," and one by one they leave the arena to flee their native Austria and the spread of Nazism, not knowing if they will ever be allowed to return. Captain Von Trapp, a broken man, saying goodbye to his Austria. Now think of the scene in The Wizard of Oz at the end of the movie when Dorothy is saying first goodbye to the lion, then the Tin Man, and lastly the Scarecrow. Who among us did not shed a tear when she said goodbye to the Scarecrow? Next, think of Travis, played by Tommy Kirk in the 1957 movie Old Yeller, when Travis has to make the difficult decision to put down his beloved dog. It takes great compassion, a great love to destroy his beloved animal. When we all cried, and don't any of you tell me that you didn't. In each case, there was a silver lining to come. The Von Trapp family singers did become well known, and the family eventually settled in the mountains of Vermont and ran a successful ski resort because the Vermont landscape reminded them of their beloved Austria. Though we know that Dorothy Gale is a fictional character, Dorothy's silver lining was that she learned you can't run from your problems, you must face them. And there is no place like home. The last scenes of Old Yeller are of a new puppy in Yeller's young image. Travis learns that you can't replace a beloved pet, but you can move on and love another pet without forgetting the lost pet. With whatever goodbyes we face, we must acknowledge our grief, look to the future, and find the silver lining. Come, let us worship together. Will Grant Fish please come forward to light the chalice? As Grant lights our chalice at First Universalist Church, and you light chalices in your own homes, will you join me in saying our chalice lighting words in unison? May we be a people of welcome, here to grow in heart and mind and spirit, and may we reach out to serve our community. Please rise now in body or in spirit and join me in the affirmation of faith, followed by our sung offering.
Quest for truth is sacrament, and service is prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all
Souls shall grow into harmony with the source of meaning of life. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all. At least 20 years ago, my daughter Katie gave me this t-shirt. It says, "The Amazing Dad and His Magic Money. All seeing, all knowing, all spending, money disappears right in front of his eyes." I have chosen to support my daughters in all their endeavors. Sometimes it's hard, and sometimes they have a hand in my pocket. I learned from my parents and grandparents that you also support your faith community. As the basket is passed today, remember all that this church, this faith, does in support of your spiritual journey, and watch the money disappear from your hand into the basket. This morning's offering will now be gratefully received. If you are here in person, you are invited to drop an offering in the offertory basket. If you are a visitor, please feel free to let the basket pass. You are invited to give online by scanning the QR code in the back of the order of service. For folks online, please click the link in the chat to give generously to the First Universalist Church. Today's offering will now be given and gratefully received. It's the second Sunday of the month, and it's the in-food gathering for the Nestor Street Food Cupper. If there's any children here, would you like to please come and get the food and bring it up to the front? Hello, that's on, okay. Before I read the story, following today's service, join us in the drop-in small group ministry to discuss the worship topic and how it impacts our lives in the Chalice Room online directly after the worship. Today's story is The 10th Good Thing About Barney by Judith Vorst. My cat Barney died last Friday. It was very sad. I cried and I didn't watch television. I cried and I didn't eat my chicken or even my chocolate pudding. I went to bed and I cried. My mother sat down on my bed and gave me a hug. She said we could all have a funeral for Barney in the morning. She said I should think of 10 good things about Barney so I could tell them at the funeral. I thought and I thought and I thought of good things about Barney. In the morning, my mother wrapped Barney in a yellow scarf. My father buried Barney in the ground by the tree in the yard. Annie, my friend from next door, came over with flowers, and I told good things about Barney. Barney was brave, I said, and smart and funny and clean, also cuddly and handsome, and he only ate a bird once. It was sweet, I said, to hear him purr in my ear, and sometimes he slept on my belly and kept it warm. Those are all good things, said my mother, but I just count 9. I said I would try to think of another one later. At the end of the funeral, we sang a song for Barney. We couldn't remember any cat songs, so we sang one about a pussy willow. Even my father knew the words. Then Annie and I went into the kitchen with Mother. She gave us orangeade, butter cookies, and left the box on the table so we could have seconds. I gave my seconds to Annie. I miss Barney, I said. Annie said Barney was in heaven with lots of cats and angels, drinking cream and eating cans of tuna. I said Barney is in the ground. Heaven, said Annie, heaven. So there, the ground, I told her, the ground. You don't know anything. My father came in from the yard and took a cookie. Big Mouth Annie said heaven again. I said ground. Tell her who's right, I asked Father. She doesn't know anything. Maybe Barney is in heaven, my father began. Aha, said Annie, and stuck her tongue out at me. And maybe, said my father, Barney isn't. What did I tell you? I said, and yanked Annie's braid. Father made me let go. We don't know too much about heaven, he said to Annie. We can't be absolutely sure it's there. But if it is there, said Annie, it is absolutely sure. In her absolutely sure voice, it's bound to have room for Barney and cream, tuna and cream. She finished another cookie and went home. My father told me he had to do work in the garden. I said I would help, but only a little. I told him I didn't like it that Barney was dead. He said, well, you shouldn't like it. It's sad, he said. He told me that it might not feel so bad tomorrow. My father had a packet of little brown seeds. He took some out of his hand. The ground will give them food and a place to live, he said, and soon they'll grow a stem and some leaves and flowers. I squeezed the packet open and looked down in the bottom. I told him I don't see any leaves and I don't see any flowers. Things change in the ground, said my father. In the ground, everything changes. Will Barney change too, I asked. Oh, yes, said Father. He'll change until he's part of the ground in the garden. And then, I asked, will he help make the flowers and the leaves? He will, said my father. He'll help grow the flowers, and he'll grow the tree and some grass. You know, he said, that's a pretty good job for a cat. My father and I planted all the seeds in the garden. Mother made sandwiches and we ate them under the tree. After lunch, we worked in the garden some more. At night, I still didn't want to watch any television. When I turned out the light, my mother sat on my bed. She gave me a hug, and I said I had something to tell her. Listen, I said. I told good things about Barney. Barney was brave, I said, and smart and funny and clean. Also cuddly and handsome, and he only once ate a bird. It was sweet, I said, to hear him purr in my ear, and sometimes he slept on my belly and kept it warm. Those are all good things, said my mother, but I still only just count 9. Yes, I said, but I have another one. Barney is in the ground, and he's helping grow flowers. You know, I said, that's a pretty good job for a cat. We already did that, didn't we? Is there any food to be picked up? Okay.
Henry is one of our students.
I invite everyone now to join in the doxology. I invite you now into this reverent time of sharing the joys and the sorrows of our gathered community. If you would like to, you can place your hand over your heart to be able to listen from this heart-centered place. As Tom Williams places stones in a bowl, I will read aloud the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. All online are also invited to share your joys and sorrows in the chat. A joy from Steve Farrington. He offers the joy that his husband, Antonio, got his citizenship on July 4th. Wishing Miss Coretta in the playroom happy birthday. A joy from Lisa Gwinner and Charlie Kortzel. Lisa is home and healing well from her surgery on July 2nd. Recovery continues. Cards are welcome. From Juanita Ball. Welcomed Missy, a rescue dog from Puerto Rico, to her home last Sunday. I invite you now to take a moment to watch the screen for the joys and sorrows that are shared with us from our online community. We acknowledge this morning that we are holding our worshiping service in this church and our community is meeting in a time of war. We acknowledge the wars and conflicts that are happening in Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, the Congo, and Sudan. We acknowledge that there are more conflicts and wars happening that we are not even aware of. We earnestly pray for these wars to cease. We light a white candle to acknowledge the grief we feel in this sanctuary and wherever we are worshiping from. Let us be connected by our grief. We also light a yellow candle to acknowledge the joy, the resilience, the tenacity found in life that still makes life worth living. Let us be connected by joy to those living through the direct impact and loss while at war in their homes, their backyards, and country. We will hold a brief moment of silence to honor the many deaths that have happened this past week due to wars across our world. And we drop one final stone in the bowl to represent all the joys and sorrows left unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. May all be held in the heart of love. I invite you now to join with me in a spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, we hold in our hearts all who are in the second half of life, those who aspire to move from aging to saging. We breathe with those hearts that have been broken open, and that we may continue to grow in love. We breathe with all who have been disappointed, that we may continue to dream. We breathe with all who no longer find delight in the activities of our youth, that we may find new delights. We breathe with those who live with daily pain, that we may find comfort and strength to greet each day anew. We breathe with those experiencing new limits in the body, grieving the loss of what we once could do, held by the body's possibilities still with us. We breathe with those whose fire is running low. May we open to the spark of inspiration and new life. And may our journeys of aging and awakening together be a blessing to us and to those around us. Amen. Blessed be. May it be so. And now I invite everyone to join in our hymn of contemplation, probably the most UU hymn of all, number 123, Spirit of Life. A few months ago, my partner Michael and I watched a PBS documentary called Sister Una Lived a Good Death. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the movie, Sister Una was a very unconventional Irish Catholic nun. She drank, she smoked, she swore, and she even liked to give people the finger when she thought they deserved it. They actually showed that once in the film, I think. She had a long career for many, many years working with troubled teens. The movie is about Sister Una's final journey with stage 4 cancer, and it follows her through the last 9 months or so of her life. Now, the film's mission, to me anyway, was quite clear from the very start, and I think I even got part of this from the little description that you read on the streaming service before you watch the movie. I believe it was meant to present Sister Una as an icon of acceptance when it comes to her own death. Through the 1 hour and 12 minutes that we spend with Sister Una, the filmmaker intends for us to see a role model of acceptance, grace, and non-attachment. Someone who can model for us the art of gracefully letting go with acceptance and concession and peace. Even before the film started, my assumption was that this was what I would see. I assumed that an over 60 Roman Catholic nun would automatically present as a peaceful, calm, almost monastic type of person whose ego had long ago been put in check and who was now clearly ready to calmly and gracefully accept her fate with as little fuss and fanfare as possible. I grew up in a Catholic school, and I have known many nuns, and I've even had the experience a couple times of visiting some of the nuns that I had in school at the St. Joseph's Mother House in Pittsford at the end of their lives, and this was kind of the experience that I had those times. What I saw instead when I watched Sister Una was a very flawed and human person who was not really accepting her destiny, but rather was preparing for a death that she was still determined to escape and defy if she could, and if she couldn't do those things, at least to control it completely on her own terms. Now, before I go any farther, I want to state very clearly that I am in no way criticizing Sister Una, nor am I denigrating her for having a very human and very natural response to a death sentence. She was clearly a wise and compassionate and charismatic person who had spent her life selflessly giving to others. She had quite obviously been an enormous inspiration to literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people. And the film included several scenes in which she is shown actively and compassionately listening to others. I remember watching the film wishing I had known her. In fact, she was beloved to the point of celebrity, which is no doubt how she attracted the attention of a major film company in the first place. But from what I saw from the very beginning, that far from being in check, her ego was large and strong and compelling. I've watched the film twice now, and I think her ego actually got in the way to the point that it prevented her from being the role model to the dying that the film wanted us to see her as. She was in reality, from what I saw, quite death-defying, saying things throughout the film like, "I am going to die my way. I want to focus on living, not on dying. Dying only gives me a chance to live more fully. I want to focus on celebrating, not on sickness and death." And she also had a fairly large bucket list that she wanted to accomplish before she died, which included things like a big fishing trip, a karaoke night, and a big trip to Las Vegas. So throughout the last months of her life, she is surrounded by a very large and very enthusiastic entourage of people who were determined to indulge her every whim and make every wish she had come true in spades. Indeed, she does actually get to accomplish everything on her list except for one very important thing. We'll get to that later. And each time, she was accompanied by literally dozens and dozens of people. So imagine what a trip to Vegas for like 25 or 30 people must have cost. Her fishing trip consisted of a group large enough to commandeer an entire summer camp on a beach in Oregon for a whole weekend. And from what they showed, each mealtime included testimonials from everyone present to the importance and specialness of Sister Una from all of her adoring entourage of fans. And she was presented with countless gifts and scrapbooks and mementos and special events from this group of very devoted, very large, and generous devotees. Sister Una's favorite niece even altered her family planning timeline by rushing to get pregnant and deliver a baby before Sister Una died to fulfill Sister Una's wish to hold that niece's first child in her arms while she was still able to. Her niece clearly states this on camera by saying that as soon as she had heard that Sister Una had this terminal diagnosis, she knew that she had to put her own timeline for having children aside, and instead she needed to have a baby as soon as possible, because this is what Sister Una so desperately wanted. So, again, I get that I am treading on risky ground saying anything even remotely critical of a dying nun. But having watched the entire film twice, I truly don't think Sister Una would mind. She consented to the film, after all, in the first place, because she hoped that people would learn lessons from her own journey toward death. And also, she wasn't responsible for the spin that others put on her story after she was gone. So it's quite possible that she didn't see herself as a role model at all, or an icon in any way, and she simply wanted the audience to see a very human struggle from a very human person, up close and personal, while they said their final goodbyes, flaws and all. It is easy, though, to see why this particular story attracted the attention of an American filmmaker, because what I took from the film were very, very American values on full display. Denial of death, the idea that with enough grit and moxie we can beat anything, at least for a while, that we can die on our own terms if we're only determined enough and have the will to do so, and also that our ultimate dreams and wishes can all be fulfilled by consumerism, even if we're nuns. Sister Una was unable, however, as one reviewer that I read put it, to pull off one final miracle. As hard as she tried to hang on for the birth of that grandnephew that we talked about earlier, even to the point where she denied taking pain medication so that she would be alert enough to drive herself to the hospital for the birth, she poignantly died within the same 24-hour period that baby Sebastian was born, and she was too ill to even fully comprehend the fact that he had been indeed born when those that were gathered around her bed tried to explain to her that it had happened. As sad as this outcome was in many ways, I also found it somehow reassuring and hopeful that life did, in fact, go on without Sister Una. Throughout the entire movie, there are a lot of one-on-one interviews between the filmmaker and Sister Una, and repeatedly she expressed how vital and essential she was to the world and to all of those people around her. She fretted at some length over her fears that her friends and relatives would be hopelessly lost without her. She said several of them were angry and despondent about her impending death, and she worried, in the case of some of them, that losing her might be more than they could take. Now, I believe that her feelings and her fears were essentially altruistic in nature. She had clearly been an inspiration and a caretaker her entire life. But when I thought about it, there is also some degree of ego involved in believing yourself to be so vitally important to those around you that the world can't get along without you. because, as we all know, it can. And perhaps the best lesson we can learn from Sister Una's good death is the one that I think maybe she needed most to learn. That a truly good death is accomplished not by fulfilling a wish list or accomplishing a goal or having a chance to say a long and fancy and elaborate goodbye to everyone that we know, but rather taking the time, if we get it, to put our place in the scheme of things in perspective and learn to let go of ourselves while we're still alive. In recent months, I have been reflecting a lot on my own death. In February, quite out of the blue and very surprising to me, I was diagnosed with heart disease, and I had 4 stents placed in the widowmaker artery. I'm glad I didn't look that up till after I came home and the procedure had been done. And then I did look at it. I thought, that's kind of cool. So I have had to make lots of life changes. Diet, medication, dealing with the side effects of medication, and carefully monitored exercise, conscious and deliberate stress reduction. I'm sure many people here this morning have had similar experiences and can relate to what I'm talking about. Situations which make us face our own inevitable mortality. And from my own, albeit very, very limited experience thus far, I'm not sure that what I saw from Sister Una was really the best role model when it comes to grappling with this ultimate existential reality that we are all faced with. I believe that learning to let go of ourselves will in the long run bring more peace and joy and compassion to however many days we have left. And I believe that we will have more serenity and acceptance when we are at our final ending, if we've done as much of the work of letting go ahead of time and letting go of ourselves as we can while we're still living and while we have time to go through the process. My own mother was in many ways a lot like Sister Una in her final years, although she didn't have any of the joy or celebration, unfortunately, that Sister Una enjoyed. She had no bucket list to complete, no personal wishes to fulfill, and she certainly did not have an entourage of people trying to make her happy. What she shared with Sister Una, however, was the consummate caretaker's belief that she was absolutely vital to the people around her. Her own ego and sense of self was so intertwined in her mind with the nature of reality itself that she really couldn't imagine anything going on without her. In her last 5 years or so, she was consumed with worry and angst over what would happen when she was gone. And she also was consumed with absolute certitude that she was so vitally necessary to everyone around her that her loss would be a fatal blow to everyone she held dear that no one would be able to recover from. This concern even extended to her material possessions. She fretted endlessly over what would happen to her things when she was gone. When my aunt, her sister, had died, it had really upset my mother very, very deeply when my aunt's children had a garage sale and sold a lot of her things. Promise me that none of my things will ever end up on a garage sale table, she implored me regularly. She tried many times even to get me to promise that I would take every single object of hers that no one wanted to spare it the fate of that dreaded garage sale table. And she asked me to do many other things for her as well. I believe that owing to a very large dose of childhood trauma, my sisters both live challenged lives. My sister Catherine is emotionally fragile and can be very volatile. Her mental health issues sometimes cause her to lash out harshly at others, and she also has a need to control situations that she's in order to feel safe. And so my mother had always borne the brunt of her moods and her whims and all of the struggles that she had. Catherine does not have many people in her life. She needs me, she would say to me all the time. She needs someone that will never get mad at her no matter what she does. So my mother used to ask me to promise that no matter what my sister did or said, I would always be there for her, and that I would never let any needs of my own prevent me from being there whenever she needed me, no matter how I was treated in return. My other sister, Joan, was needy in a whole different way. She's one of those people that I think every family has at least one of, who doesn't manage her money well. No matter how much money she has or how much she's given, it's never enough to stand between her and financial ruin. And my mother heavily subsidized her and kind of managed her bills for her to the extent that she could. So in her case, my mother wanted me to promise that I would take over that role as well, that I would loan her money whenever she needed it, and I would help her to whatever degree was necessary, because my mother was convinced that without that kind of help and intervention, she would end up homeless. And then there were my mother's beloved cats, Tippy and Tyler. My mother wanted me to promise that I would take both of her cats, even though I already had 2 dogs and 2 cats of my own at the time. And then finally there was my stepfather. Her marriage to him, like a lot of second marriages, had always been plagued by a degree of financial tension. So she wanted me to do whatever I could to settle that score on her account and make sure that he paid for anything that he had ever done that was unfair in her eyes. So one night, after a particularly long phone conversation with her in which she had reiterated this whole list of requests from me, it dawned on me that what she was essentially asking was that I take over being her after she was gone, because she could not let go of herself even enough to conceive of the possibility that anything could take place after she was gone, unless she had an understudy, someone willing to cast aside their own priorities and their own commitments to assume every role she had played. Now, over the years, as I've told these stories, several people have commented to me and said, what an unfair burden your mother placed on you with all of those requests. But I have to say, I have never felt burdened. I had had enough life experience by that time and enough therapy to understand by that point that I did not owe anyone that much of myself, and that what she was asking was absolutely impossible, even if I had been willing to give it my all. What I used to feel instead during those conversations, and what I feel right now in retelling those stories, is a great sense of compassion for my mother. She had so totally and absolutely fused her identity with the role that she had taken on that she didn't have any freedom to enjoy or celebrate at all. I wish there had been an entourage to take her to a summer camp or take her to Las Vegas or do at least one thing that she had always wanted to do. If only she had been able to let go of herself at least a little bit and let go of those roles that she felt she needed to play in everyone's life, maybe those last few years would have been spent with at least some degree of peace and acceptance, rather than the constant agitation and angst that I saw whenever we talked. And I'm sure that I don't have to explain to anyone here this morning that everyone was just fine after my mother was gone. My sister Catherine decided in very short order, by the way, that I was absolutely the last person she would ever turn to for any kind of support. I did help out my sister Joan a couple of times financially in the first year or so after my mother was gone, but I quickly realized that if I didn't do something about this, this was going to be a never-ending problem. So about the 4th time, I said, no, I'm sorry, I'm not in a position to help you. She has managed just fine in all of those years since, and she has not only never ended up homeless like my mother was afraid, she has actually a couple times taken in people who need a place to stay and need someone to care for them. So she quickly figured out how to get by on her own. Tippy and Tyler, the cats, were taken in by a family friend, and they were loved and cherished until both of them died. And as for my stepfather, he had the upper hand of being the surviving spouse, so he very quickly settled the financial score in his own favor, and he was the one who placed my mother's cherished items on the garage sale table. So in the final measure, I would not have been able to keep any of those promises that my mother wanted me to make for her, even if I had wanted to, because that is not how life works. Life is for the living. It is in the present moment. It is in the lived experience. It really can't be controlled, certainly cannot be controlled at that level. And what I am seeing more and more as I reflect on my own journey is that we can't hold ourselves too tightly. We can't cling or grasp. We take the joy out of everything when we do that. And as was shown by the example of my mother's worrying and fretting, we don't change anything anyway. We are better served, I think, by accepting our limited ability to control things and by putting ourselves into perspective in the larger context. I mean, think about it. Isn't it a relief to reflect upon the fact that those people that you love are able to get along without you? I would think no one would want to feel that they couldn't. So I think we're better off when we don't take ourselves too seriously, when we understand what our role and our scope is in the world, when we accept our fairly limited place in the scheme of things. The ability to do these things, I believe, is a gift. Letting go of ourselves is the pathway to freedom and peace and joy and compassion. The less tightly we hold things, the more peace and joy we will have. The more we will be present for others. The more we will be able to separate self-interest from what's good for the collective whole. We'll consume less. We'll need less. We'll ask less. We will want less. And in letting go of ourselves, we are letting go of grasping and angst and worry and anxiety and anger and sadness. So take a moment to reflect. What struggles are you having? What situation are you perhaps trying to control beyond your ability or even maybe beyond your lifespan? Who are you convinced can't get along without you? What would you want to promise to those you leave behind? When you contemplate death, what are you the most afraid of leaving undone? What dreams and wishes do you have yet to fulfill? And then think about the totality of all of that and think, how crucial are those things to your happiness right now, in this moment, in this seat or in your seat at home, in your heart and your soul, as you're with yourself? Are all of these things crucial to you in this moment? So I invite you to all go with me for a moment of doing free association. When I ask my question, you know how this works. You just go with whatever comes to mind first. So picture a moment in your life when you experienced true, pure joy. So was it a moment that you had planned for? Was it on a bucket list? Was it a dream you had carefully cultivated and worked toward for a long time? Was it a moment that you were fulfilling everyone else's wants and needs? Or was it just an unplanned, spontaneous, unremarkable moment when you forgot yourself and your problems, your dreams, your hopes, your goals, your to-do lists, and just were present and appreciative? if it was one of those moments, and I am sure everyone has, if you think about it for a moment, everyone has had those moments, then those were moments when you let go of yourself. I'm starting to believe that by practicing letting go of myself in the present moment, I will be able better to really let go of myself at the time when that final goodbye comes, unless it comes so quickly I don't even have time to think about it. But I take a lot of comfort the more I reflect on it, to think about that the world will be just fine without me. The world will be just fine without you. And you're not here to fulfill a bucket list. All of your experiences, no matter what they are sacred and meaningful. Some of the happiest people have lived some of the humblest, most modest lives. We are not consumers of life. We are travelers on a journey. We really have no dreams to fulfill, only experiences to have. Whatever those experiences are, whatever they are enough. They have to be, because there really isn't anything else. To have any other expectations of our lives is to live with an illusion. A number of years ago, my friend Bob was on an airplane. It was a relatively short commuter flight. I can't recall to where, but it was one of those turbulent weather days, and there had been several delays because of the weather. He and the other passengers waiting for the flight had endured several disappointments before finally being given the green light to go ahead and board the plane. So because of the weather warnings and how much the weather was on everyone's mind, some of his fellow passengers, by the time they actually got on the plane, were nervous, and they were anxiously chatting among themselves about their fears. Should we be flying on such a weather day? There was, however, a pair of women who Bob guessed to be probably in their 80s. And they, like everyone else, had endured the entire afternoon of ups and downs with a calm and undisturbed patience and lack of concern as far as he could see. When Bob finally took his seat on the plane, the two women were sitting behind him. Now, he himself even had grown a little worried about the delays, and he had the weather reports on his mind, and he was a little nervous, wondering what was going to happen. And he was feeling very anxious, and he wanted to get that flight over with. So the plane began taxiing down the runway, quickly picking up speed as it approached takeoff. And right at that, that instant where you feel that the wheels have left the ground, just as that happened, one of the women behind him said to her companion, "Well, Millie, in the best case scenario, we'll be there in about an hour. Worst case, we don't get there at all." And then they both chuckled together, and they had a relaxed flight, chatting about where they were heading and what they were going to do. And my friend Bob found this nonchalance and their humor about the situation that they were in very reassuring, and he relaxed and enjoyed the flight. And that became one of his favorite stories to tell. And I have told that story many, many times over the 30 or so years that I've known it, because I love that story too. I think it's a wonderful example of being able to let go of oneself and not take life too seriously. I sometimes think of that story and I picture them in the plane and everything when I am worried and I'm stressed, and I try to remind myself that my destiny is largely not within my control. It may be slightly counterintuitive, but I find it liberating to ponder this fact. I hope you do too. I also love the story of the women on the airplane because it's a lesson that we need to get into the habit of letting ourselves go right now, in little mundane moments. I believe that becoming conscious of our true place in the whole scheme of things on a regular basis will not only liberate us to live with more peace and more joy and more contentment, but we will also be better prepared when it's time for letting go in the ultimate way that we will all experience eventually. Sister Una, definitely from the film that I saw, had a lot of fun in her final year of life. But I think perhaps she confused joy and unwittingly substituted she confused fun with joy, unwittingly substituted celebration for serenity because she intellectually processed the fact that she was dying soon, and then she emotionally clung desperately to herself and her idea of who she was, instead of easing into the process of letting go herself, which, by the way, I just want to say clear, I'm not sure that I would be able to do any better, so I'm not. But I'm hoping. But after watching that film, I am grateful to her for allowing me to witness her dying process in such an intimate, up close, and personal way. And I am very grateful to her for giving me a much needed wake-up call. I hope that I have served some of that role for all of you this morning. Blessed be, amen. And now please join us in singing our closing hymn, number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath. Please remain standing as we extinguish our chalice flame this morning. Let us read together the words printed on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. Beauty is before me and behind me. Beauty is above me and below me. Everywhere around me hovers the beautiful. I am surrounded by it. I am immersed in it. In my youth, I am aware of it, and in my old age, I shall walk quietly the beautiful trail. In beauty, it is begun, and in beauty, it is ended. And to this, let us say together, Amen. I would like to acknowledge now again our online community, and as we close this service, I invite you to place a hand over your heart. If you are joining us online, I invite you to turn your settings to gallery view and look upon the faces of those here with you. For those of you in the room, let us take a moment to look around at those of you who are here today. And let the people of the church, both here and at home, say together, Amen. I invite those of you who are here to join us in the Clara Barton Lounge for refreshments after the service.